Week 5 of the 2021 college football season is in the books. Week 6 is on the way. That can only mean one thing. It's time to update the only rankings that matter, at least prior to the playoff rankings. The UNCLELOU Top 25. Let's do it. Yeah, good morning in that, but it's Uncle Lou here, though. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou. Live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it also, and to in addition to that as well. Hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know at the end down below in the comment section whether you think this one was watchable or not. You can also, of course, let me know what I get wrong, particularly in the top 10. But you guys know how I do these videos. I'm going to start with number 10 and go down to number 1. And then at the end of the video, I will post 11 through 25 on the screen for you to see. I explain my rankings 10 through 1. I don't do 11 through 25 because the video would be 3 hours long, but I try to give at least the best explanation I can as to why I have each team ranked where I do within the top 10. You don't have to agree with my reasoning or where I have the team ranked, but at least you'll know the reasoning that I used. All right, let's get started. Okay, coming in at number 10 this week in the UNCLELOU Top 10. First time in the top 10, I think, in the history of the UNCLELOU rankings, which I've only been doing for 3 or 4 years. But I don't think this team has ever been, they've been ranked before, but I don't think this team has ever made it into the top 10. But this week, they come in at number 10. They're 5-0. They beat something called Western Kentucky this past weekend, 48-31. They play at Rutgers this coming week. Sparty, I have Michigan State at number 10 in this week's UNCLELOU Top 10 ranking. The Big Ten is getting ridiculous. There's 5 teams. Is it 5? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 5 teams from the Big Ten are in the UNCLELOU Top 10. The Big Ten is the best conference in football right now. It's no surprise. It's not spoiling anything to tell you that I think the SEC has the best 2 teams in football. But the best conference this year, at least right now, is the Big Ten, with 5 teams in my top 10, including at number 10, Michigan State. Now, a lot of these teams are going to play each other over the next couple of weeks. Michigan State's going to play Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. Same thing. So Ohio State's going to play Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State. Penn State's going to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. You see what I'm saying? So there's going to be some losses coming for a lot of these undefeated teams, or in Ohio State's case, one-loss teams that are highly ranked in the Big Ten right now. But I think right now, through the first month of the season, the first 5 weeks, I think the Big Ten is the best conference in football, with 5 teams in my top 10, including Michigan State at number 10. At number 9, Michigan State's older brother, Michigan. That's right. I'm having to force myself to not drink the Michigan Kool-Aid. I have been burned on Michigan so many times over the years on this channel where I fell for what they were selling. I got hoodwinked, bamboozled, and run amok by Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. But don't look now, but they're playing pretty good football. My only question or concern about Michigan right now is the passing game. I'm not saying they can't throw the ball. I'm just saying I haven't seen them do it. They haven't had to. They're a great running team. They play good defense. I don't think they've thrown for over 200 yards in a game this year, but like I said, they haven't had to. They absolutely destroyed Wisconsin this past weekend on the road at Wisconsin, 38-17, a place that they had not won at since like Y2K. I mean, it's been forever since Michigan has won on the road at Wisconsin, and it wasn't even close. They beat them 38-17. This week they go on the road again to play Nebraska, a team that I don't think is very good, but Nebraska had a huge win this past weekend, too. By a huge win, I mean they scored a lot of points and blew them out. It wasn't a big game, but I still don't think Nebraska's a very good team. I think Michigan is much better than Nebraska, and even though this is a road game for Michigan, it would be a big surprise, at least to me, if Michigan stumbled and lost this week. Looks like they'll probably stay undefeated for another week. They're 5-0 right now, likely to be 6-0 after this coming week on the road at Nebraska. But I've got the Wolverines coming in at number 9. Number 8, Ohio State. And it's hard for me to rank. I mean, it's hard to rank some of these teams in the top 10. It just is. Michigan's going to say they should be ahead of Ohio State, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with somebody putting Michigan ahead of Ohio State. I'm admitting a personal bias when it comes to Michigan because I've been tricked by them so many times. I don't want to look like a fool again by going all in on Michigan after the first 5 weeks. I think they're a good team. Ohio State seems to be playing better right now than they were at the beginning of the season. Now, there are no do-overs in college football. You can't go back and replay that Oregon game. You lost at home to Oregon, and that's not going to change. I mean, you're going to have one loss at least, no matter what happens the rest of the season. No matter how good you play or no matter how much better you get, that loss isn't going away. We can't pretend like it's not there. But I feel like they've played pretty good the last couple of weeks. They played good again this last weekend. They beat Rutgers 52-13 on the road at Rutgers. It was the same Rutgers team that competed pretty well with Michigan the week before. Wasn't it 20-10 or something, the final score there? Something like that. I think Michigan was a 20-point favorite and only won by 10. So Rutgers covered last week. They did not cover this week. Ohio State absolutely destroyed them 52-13. Now, maybe this was a cumulative effect for Rutgers of having to play 2 really tough games back-to-back. I don't know, but the point is Ohio State looked really, really good. The quarterback played well, which people have been, hoping that he would come around. He had probably his best game, and they just ran over Rutgers. This game was not competitive and was not close. They host Maryland this week, who looked like a pretty good team, but then just got absolutely destroyed by Iowa this past weekend. Friday night, actually. That was the Friday night game. But I've got Ohio State at 10, 9, 8. I've got the Buckeyes at 8 in this week's UNCLELOU poll. I have Oregon at 7. Now, if Ohio State and Oregon played today, who would I pick to win? Probably Ohio State. But look, until Oregon loses another game, it's going to be hard for me to move Ohio State ahead of them. If as long as Ohio State and Oregon are both sitting at 1 loss, I have to have Oregon ahead of Ohio State, I think. Now, maybe at some point down the road, if Ohio State were to beat, let's say, an undefeated Penn State or Michigan State, they of course play Michigan at the end of the year. Maybe at some point I'll be forced to move Ohio State ahead of Oregon, even if Oregon doesn't lose another game. But at least right now, I'm keeping Oregon ahead of Ohio State. Head-to-head has to matter. To me, there's no truer comparison between two teams than head-to-head. Now, it's different when you have, some team with 5 losses or something gets lucky, pulls some huge upset against an undefeated team. Obviously, you can't put a 3 or 4 loss team all the way up into the Big Ten or all the way up into the top 10 just because they happen to beat an undefeated, highly ranked team. But when the two teams you're talking about have the same number of losses, in this case, Ohio State and Oregon, it's just hard for me to move Ohio State ahead. So I've got Oregon at number 7, even though they lost this past weekend on the road at Stanford 31-24. A disappointing loss for Oregon, and really for the entire Pac-12. It seemed like the first couple of weeks of the season, the Pac-12 was riding high. UCLA had that win over LSU. Oregon had the win on the road at Ohio State. It looked like the Pac-12 was back to mattering. And in a few short weeks since then, things have not gone well for the Pac-12. UCLA has dropped a couple of games. Southern Cal's fired their coach and fell off a cliff. Arizona State might be the best team in the Pac-12 South. Oregon lost this past weekend to what I think is not a very good Stanford team. So I don't think this is a good loss. Ohio State has a good loss to Oregon. Oregon has what I think is a bad loss to Stanford. Will Oregon make the playoffs if they finish the season 12-1 with a Pac-12 title? It's hard to say. It obviously depends on what happens in some other conferences. I think on one hand, Oregon was helped a lot this weekend by Notre Dame losing because that keeps them out. That keeps them from taking the spot away from Oregon. But they lost to Cincinnati. What if it comes down to, what if at the end of the season, the top three teams are clear, whoever those three teams happen to be, and the playoff committee is sitting there trying to decide between a 13-0 conference champion Cincinnati with a win on the road at Notre Dame versus a 12-1 Oregon with a conference title with a win on the road at Ohio State, but a loss to, let's say, a Stanford team that finishes the season with 4 or 5 losses. How do they decide between those two scenarios if it were to come down to that? So I don't know. Obviously, Cincinnati's got more games left to play, but their most difficult game of the season was this past weekend, and they won. So they're not, they're going to be favored, pretty big favorites in the rest of the games they play. Central Florida looks like they've fallen off a cliff since they hired Beat Boop Gus Malzahn. That game doesn't appear to be much of a test at this point for Cincinnati. Desmond Ritter's a legitimate Heisman candidate, in my opinion. But so I've got Oregon at 7. It wouldn't bother me if someone put Ohio State ahead of Oregon. That wouldn't bother me. But just for my reasoning, I try to explain why I have these teams where I have them. You don't have to agree with my rankings or my reasoning, but I do try to at least provide that explanation. At number 6, I've got Oklahoma. Has anybody watched an Oklahoma game this year and went, now there's a playoff team? I haven't yet. Oklahoma, to me, is one of the most disappointing undefeated teams in America. Every game seems to be a struggle for them. Now, they finally got over the Kansas State hump and beat them this weekend. But again, not an overly impressive win for Oklahoma. They won 37-31. Spencer Rattler continues to be up and down. The offensive line has issues. Kennedy Brooks is a decent running back, but they don't have the running game they've had in years past. And the defense, which I got tricked. I thought Oklahoma's defense was going to be pretty good this year, and at times it has looked pretty good. But there's too many times in every game for Oklahoma that the defense just seems to revert back to 2017, 2018, where they can't tackle. Basic fundamentals go out the window. It seems like that's going to catch up with Oklahoma at some point. You just can't keep winning these 4, 5, 6, 7, 10-point games even. One of these teams is going to end up beating you. It could be this coming weekend. Oklahoma, the Red River Shootout is this weekend, Oklahoma and Texas. And I know Texas got blown out by Arkansas, and now Arkansas has got blown out by Georgia. And so all the simple-minded and basic people just think, well, Arkansas is not any good now. Arkansas was good 2 days ago. They were going to beat Georgia 2 days ago. Georgia beats them 37-0. Now Arkansas is no good. Arkansas is good. That was a bad loss for Texas in that it wasn't close, but just losing to Arkansas in and of itself doesn't make it a bad loss. Now, it wasn't a very competitive game, but Texas has gotten better, in my opinion, since that loss to Arkansas. The quarterback is playing good. Their defense is playing a little bit better. They've got probably the best running back in America. If you're looking for a running back to sort of shake things up in the Heisman race, it's the running back for Texas. Bijan Robinson is his name. He's got a ton of yards already and touchdowns. He's a lot of fun to watch. That's going to be a good game this weekend. If I had to make a pick on that game right now, which I don't, I'll do that later, but I'm leaning towards picking Texas to win. And if that happens, that will solve the Oklahoma problem. That they'll be out of it because I don't think Oklahoma has been dominant enough in any of its game this year, really, to survive a loss and still get into the playoffs. I just don't. But we'll see. That game's coming up this weekend. I'll do a prediction video later in the week. But I've got Oklahoma at number 6. They're 5-0. They beat Kansas State 37-31 on the road this past weekend. And like I mentioned, the Red River Shootout coming up this weekend. College Game Day will be there. Oklahoma versus Texas. Getting into the top 5, and I've got Cincinnati at 5. I hate to do this because I had Cincinnati at 5 last week, and then they beat Notre Dame, and I can't move them up. And it's not because I don't think Cincinnati's deserves a shot at the playoffs. It's got nothing to do with that. I think Cincinnati may end up getting into the playoffs. But I've got them at number 5, and of course they beat Notre Dame this weekend, 24-13 on the road in South Bend. They play Temple this coming week. They'll destroy Temple unless they do one of those sleepwalk things in the first half like they've been known to do. But if you watch the Cincinnati-Notre Dame game, it wasn't a fluke. Cincinnati didn't get lucky. Cincinnati was a better team. If they played again tomorrow, Cincinnati would win again. I know nobody has been overly impressed with Notre Dame, and myself included. 3-point win over Florida State, close game with Toledo. They did beat the brakes off of Wisconsin last week, but they couldn't get it done this week. Notre Dame was a top 10 team, and Cincinnati took them down. Probably the biggest win in Cincinnati program history, right? They had a shot at Ohio State a couple of years ago and lost. They had a shot at Georgia in a bowl game this past season and lost. Their only loss of the year last year. They're undefeated. They've got 2 wins over Power 5 teams. They've got a win against Indiana, and now a win on the road against a pretty good Notre Dame team. Maybe not a great Notre Dame team, definitely not a playoff Notre Dame team, but still a pretty good Notre Dame team. A Notre Dame team that's probably going to finish the season in the top 10. If you look at the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, their 2 toughest games that remain are North Carolina and Southern Cal. I mean, neither one of those 2 teams are as good as we thought they were going to be in the offseason. Those look like winnable games now for Notre Dame. I had predicted Notre Dame to lose those games when I did my schedule predictions in the offseason. But, Southern Cal obviously is nosedive, and North Carolina is just too up and down. It's hard to trust North Carolina right now in any big game. I would pick Notre Dame to beat both those teams if they were playing tomorrow. So, and Cincinnati needs that. Cincinnati needs Notre Dame to win the rest of their games and go 11-1 so that Cincinnati can say, look, Notre Dame's only loss was to us. We deserve a shot. Will it happen? Again, just like with Oregon, it's going to depend what happens around them in the top 10, right? Does Oklahoma lose a game? What ends up happening in the Big Ten East in particular? You have a lot of really good teams in the Big Ten East, but they're going to play each other. So some of these really good teams are going to end up with 2 losses. So obviously Cincinnati is going to be ahead of a 2-loss Big Ten East team. What about a 1-loss Big Ten East team? Those are the things we'll have to figure out as the season moves along. Going into the top 4, I've got Iowa at number 4. The Hawkeyes looked really, really good on Friday night in a dangerous game against a pretty good Maryland team. These weekday games where a highly ranked team has to go on the road to play an inferior opponent, we see teams lose in that situation all the time. Not Iowa. I mean, they absolutely destroyed Maryland 51-14 on the road, a very impressive win. And they've got a pretty good resume built up already. They beat Indiana. They beat Iowa State. Now they beat Maryland. They're in the weaker side of the Big Ten. They're in the West. Wisconsin, Nebraska. I mean, there's not really any good teams left in the Big Ten West outside of Iowa. So, Iowa's got a pretty good road to the Big Ten title game, even with a loss, should they get one. And they could get one this week. This is a huge game coming up this week. Iowa is hosting Penn State. This is going to be a huge game. There's going to be a lot of games within the Big Ten over the next few weeks that are going to go a long way to determining not just the Big Ten title and who plays for the Big Ten title, but who gets into the playoffs or who is in serious contention for the playoffs come November and late November. This is going to be a great game. But they Penn State beat Indiana this weekend 24-0. And like I mentioned, they go on the road. Iowa hosts Penn State. Penn State beat Indiana 24-0. Iowa beat Maryland 51-14. Penn State is my third-ranked team. I've got Penn State at 3. You can put Penn State and Iowa. You can reverse the order if you want to. It doesn't matter to me. But I do think this should be everyone's top 4. I've got Iowa 4, Penn State 3. Like I mentioned, they beat Indiana 24-0. Play this week on the road at Iowa. Doesn't really matter where you have Penn State or Iowa right now, since they play this coming weekend. Obviously, whoever wins that game, a legitimate top 4 team. Whoever loses that game, probably dropping back to the 7 or 8 spot, depending on the score. If Iowa beats Penn State by 40 points, maybe Penn State falls further, but I don't expect that to happen. I think this will be a pretty good game here. So the winner is going to be a legitimate top 4 team, and the loser probably still be in the top 10. Number 2, I've got Alabama at number 2. All last week I told you, Alabama's playing an undefeated top 15 team, Ole Miss. They were ranked 12th at home. Alabama was playing them. Georgia's playing a top 10 team, Arkansas. They were ranked 8th at home for Georgia. I said, look, whoever wins by more, that's who's going to be number 1. I have thought Georgia was the best team in the country for about 2 or 3 weeks in a row now, but I kept Alabama at number 1. But I thought this week was a pretty good test to determine who looks better so far. Alabama at home beat the 12th ranked team 42-21. Georgia at home beat the 8th ranked team 37-0 with a backup quarterback. So I moved Georgia to 1. Again, people, you're going to cry, get your Kleenex out. I've never seen a football game. I'm an idiot. I'm just a Georgia homer. I hate Bama. You say whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't matter where these two teams are ranked. They're going to be playing the first weekend in December in the SEC title game, and whoever wins that game is going to be the number 1 seed in the playoffs, and whoever loses is probably going to be the 4 seed. Both of these teams are probably getting into the playoffs unless one of them stumbles in the regular season and loses the SEC title game. They wouldn't get in with 2 losses, but I think both of these teams, if they go 12-0, then no matter who wins or loses the SEC title game, I think they'll both get in. And that will screw Cincinnati. That'll be what keeps Cincinnati out, if anything, probably. But I've got Alabama at 2. They destroyed Ole Miss. I think it was 35-0 at one point. Ole Miss scored a couple of touchdowns later, whatever. But that doesn't matter. 42-21 final score. You can tell me all you want about how you put the backups in on defense and they scored on. You can tell me anything you want. Bryce Young played the entire game. The other guy didn't even attempt to pass. Their backup didn't even attempt to pass. Georgia's backup started and played the entire game. And Georgia won. Alabama fans keep telling me, Lou, we were up 35-0 and took our foot off the gas. Well, we were up 37-0 and we ended the game that way. We didn't let them score, and we had the backups in the second half too on defense. So it's just, look, people are going to get mad. I don't care. I said all week, whoever wins by more is going to be number 1. Georgia won by 37. Bama won by 21. So this week, anyway, I've got Georgia at 1 and Alabama at 2. Alabama plays on the road at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is unranked. I'm not making it up. Texas A&M is unranked right now. Georgia plays on the road at Auburn. Auburn is ranked 18th. Georgia's got the tougher game this week. If Alabama beats the bejesus out of Texas A&M and Georgia barely beats Auburn, I'll flop them back around again. I'll put Bama up at number 1. But Georgia's got the tougher game this week. If you go by rankings, Georgia's got the tougher game. On the road at Auburn, Alabama on the road at Texas A&M. I don't think either one of those 2 games are going to be close. Georgia's won the last 2 games by a combined score of 99-0. SEC opponents. And you can say, well, it's Vandy. Well, find me 2 games in a row that your team won 99-0. You can't. I don't care what what team you're a fan of. You can't find me back-to-back games where you won by a combined score of 99-0. Georgia as a team has given up 23 points all year. All year. Georgia's defense has only given up 16 points all year. 7 of the points are on a pick 6. That's where the 23 number comes from. Georgia's defense has only given up 16 points all year. Alabama gave up 21 2 days ago. They gave up 14 to Mercer. Georgia ain't got no offense. Georgia has the eighth ranked offense in America. Points per game. And that's what matters. Points. Georgia has the 8th ranked offense in America, points per game. Georgia's averaging, I believe, 40 or 41 points a game. Alabama's averaging 44. Georgia's got the number 1 ranked defense in America in almost every single category you look at, but especially points per game. Georgia's given up, 3.8 points per game? Come on. Alabama's given up what? I mean, what is Alabama's rank in points per game on defense? 25th? I don't know what it is. It's not first, I can tell you that. It's not first. Right now, Georgia is the best team. Now, they don't hand out national titles in the beginning of October. But right now, Georgia's the best team in America, period. That could change tomorrow, next week, next month. But right now, Georgia's the best team. I've got them ranked 1, and I've got the Gumps ranked 2. Cry about it.